This episode is sponsored by Squarespace. Whether you need a domain, website, or online store, make your next move with Squarespace. I said a little while ago that I'd make more videos giving you tips about some of the filmmaking side of things. And so today, I thought I'd make a really practical little video, just giving you a tip about the video editor I've been using for the last 2 years and why I made the switch. When it comes to editing over my career, I've been comfortable with both Adobe Premiere Pro and Final Cut Pro. It just depended on the circumstance. So every time I was working in-house for a company, it seemed companies just buy everyone the Adobe suite. So I had to get used to Premiere Pro there. And that's where I built up that skill set. But at home, I had an iMac. And so I bought Final Cut Pro for my own stuff years ago. In fact, if you've been following this channel for a while, the first 3 or 4 years of this channel was all put together on Final Cut Pro. However, about 2 years ago, that iMac was really slowing down and it was time to upgrade. And I just couldn't justify the expense for buying another Apple machine when I knew that I could take the same amount of money that I could afford and build myself a monster PC with amazing specs. But that obviously left me with a problem. I could no longer use Final Cut Pro because it only works on Apple machines. And so I had to take a look, and was it time to fork out a lot of extra money every month with Adobe to get Premiere Pro? Now I'm on the photographer's plan with Adobe, which means for about £10 a month, I have access to Adobe Bridge, Adobe Camera Raw, Lightroom, both CC and Classic, and most importantly for me, Photoshop, which means all those programs, I get those 5 programs for £10 a month. But at the time I was looking at switching to Adobe Premiere Pro, if I wanted to add that one extra app to edit videos on, my subscription would have gone from £10 a month to £45 a month, which is £35 extra just for Premiere Pro, and I couldn't justify that cost. But I knew that Davinci Resolve was a fully featured video editor with some of the best color grading tools in the industry, and I really remember struggling with color grading on Final Cut Pro 10. And best of all, Davinci Resolve was 100% free. Now, it's important to say at this point that if you Google it, you'll probably see that about 6 or 7 years ago, before I had a YouTube channel, I actually did a little work with Blackmagic. They took 10 of us who were hybrid shooters, which meant we shot both stills and video equally, and they took us away for a weekend. They gave us Blackmagic Pocket Cinema cameras, the first one, the original one, taught us how to use it and sort of encouraged us to maybe try and make the switch over to Blackmagic. However, this was a long time ago. I've never taken any money from them, and even back then I had to turn around and say to them, listen, as good as your Pocket Cinema cameras are, and they are great cameras, it just wasn't right for me, and at the time I decided to stick with the Canon cameras I was using, and I told them that. And I also said to them, I'm afraid I'm not going to switch to Davinci Resolve, which was in version 12 back then, I think, because it just wasn't quite there for me. So even though they took us away and we did some work with them, at the end of the day, it just wasn't the right time to make that switch for me. You have to say stuff like this in videos like this because the conspiracy theorists will be down in the comments below. We did a bit of Googling. He did some work with them before and he's being paid to say this. Blackmagic don't know I'm making this video, and they would honestly probably be very surprised to hear me saying this because the last time they heard from me, I turned all their stuff down, Davinci Resolve in particular. I'm only sharing this stuff because it's genuinely the solution I've found that works for my needs. At the time when I built that PC, we'd gone from Davinci Resolve 12, which I didn't feel was quite ready for me, to Davinci Resolve 16, which was a far more slick operation. And looking at the reviews, I could see they'd done so much work to streamline the whole experience and strip it right down. And so I thought, with the fact that it was free, I wasn't going to have to put any money down. It was at least worth giving it a go. At the time, I remember I just filmed a video and I needed to have it edited by the weekend. So there was a little bit of time pressure as well. But I thought, let me download this, let me try it, give myself the next couple of days to slowly edit through this video I have to do, give myself that little extra buffer of a day maybe to hope that I can get to use this thing and get to know how it works. And hopefully if I can get that video out by the weekend, this might be a good solution for me. And if not, I'm going to have to fork out money and go with Adobe. But the experience of switching over was actually much easier than I thought it would be. When you load up Davinci Resolve, it even says to you, are you more used to using Adobe Premiere Pro or Final Cut Pro 10? I selected Final Cut because it was what I was used to editing for these YouTube videos, and it automatically sets all your shortcuts up the same as you're used to on those other programs. And so I found that I got through that edit for that video, and it maybe only took me an hour extra, not a day like I thought it might, just an hour extra to get used to some of the extra things in that program. And I put the video out on time, and honestly, I've never looked back. So I thought in this video, I'd give you an overview of what's now Davinci Resolve version 17, so you can see how easy it actually is to use, because I think it will be incredibly helpful to those of you who are filmmakers on a budget or with limited means who need access to a full-featured video editor. So let's just open up Davinci Resolve 17, and I'll give you this basic overview of how I use it. And it's important to say up front that I'm a very simple user. It's a very powerful program, but I just use the tools that I need to get the videos done the way that I need them done, which is, you know, I'm a very kind of lightweight user, but hopefully it'll give you an idea. This is your project pane here, which sort of shows you the different projects that you're working on. This is the intro that I've just recorded for this video I'm working on now. This is a video that's coming out in a couple of weeks, and this is the last one that I did with Josh Edgoose. So let's open this one up, because you might have seen this video, so you'll be able to sort of work out what I've done here. And the important thing in Davinci Resolve is this bar along here. This kind of walks you through creating your video from left to right. Media, cut, edit, fusion, color, fairlight, and deliver. So you're just going to work left to right through these tabs. So at the moment, we have media selected. And in media, what I'm doing is I'm collecting all the elements that I need to build my video out. So at the moment, I've got master selected, which just collects everything in one. And a lot of people just drag all their clips into this one area and work from that. And that's absolutely fine. I like to organize things a little more than that. So I create what are called bins underneath. And bins are just separate folders where I can group different things. So this is my interview folder where I've got the clips where I interviewed Josh and the audio from that interview. Underneath is B-roll. This is where I'm collecting all the clips I use, just filming him out and about that I could cut over the interview and make it more visually interesting. This is the intro, which I recorded for the video, and the audio from that. And here are photos that Josh sent me to include to show his images at the end. So I just like to organize things like that. To create a new bin, really simple, just in this area here, right click, new bin, and let's just create one called audio, just for example's sake. So if I select audio, there's nothing in it yet. Here are my drives up at the top. So if I go to my D drive and I go to current projects, and I've put everything in spicy because it's Josh's name, Spicy Meatball on Instagram. And then I'm going to drag in some audio clips here. So go into my audio folder, and you can see now I've just grouped things. So now here are some audio items which I might want to use, and having them just selected in these different bins helps me when it comes to editing. Now if we move from left to right one, we go to cut. I'm going to be honest, I don't use this tab at all. It's for sort of more detail editing. I find that just by zooming in and out, I can do everything I need with edit. So I go media and I skip straight over to edit. Now in my edit here, this is where I start to build my timeline. Those of you who've used editors before, I don't need to explain what a timeline is. If I just hold Alt and scroll with my mouse wheel, I can zoom in and out, and I can drag along here to sort of access different parts. And this is the edit that I've built out here. So if I come to master, you can see a little red tick at the top corner of this. This is my timeline. I've called it final. So this is the final build. So you can see.
Yeah, I mean, it's just been years and years of, but more often than not, yeah. Absent
some B-roll, some music underneath. So all I'm doing in this tab is I'm building out my edit. I'm using my interview clips and audio, and then I'm adding B-roll in between different sections and music, and my little outro section where I've recorded some stuff on the topic as well, out into white background and some photos at the end with some music. So that's as simple as I keep this. Let me just show you sort of from scratch how I do that. So if I go right click into this area here, I go timelines, and let's go create new timeline and just do a test timeline here, create. So that's going to give me a blank timeline here. Now if I go to interview, and let me drag on just a couple of clips of Josh talking. This is a question I get a lot actually, because I record separate audio for my cameras. So the audio in the cameras doesn't sound that great. The audio that I captured through the audio recorder on the lab mic, which you'll see on his shirt here, is always better quality. So I need to sync that up right off the bat. So let me just go in here, because this is a slightly longer section of audio than the actual clip. So I'm just going to cut this here and clip that out. So all I need to do is select all these clips together, right click on it, go up here to auto align clips and go auto align based on waveform. And I'm just going to let that run, and it's going to line those clips up. It's going to analyze the audio and line them up. So let's just check that that's done that. Here we go.
To like shooting color and stuff, and it wasn't an option, and I eventually persuaded them to let me take color photographs.
So that sounds good to me. It's all synced up together. That's 2 different camera angles, and I like to use 2 camera angles rather than just cropping in on a 4K or something, because the change of camera angle, let's see if I can just select the one. The change on the camera angle and the change on the focal length, I think, adds a little bit of interest and quality. So what I do then is I can mute these 2 tracks here and just use the good audio from the recorder. And you can hear, like if I mute this track here, okay, the audio is very soft at the moment. Let me just select those and go to Inspector, and I'm just going to boost up this volume for you so you can hear.
Photography for a couple of years, I think I almost a bit like put off it by the whole, rigorous art side of it. And then a couple of years after that, I ended up starting a clothing business. I was designing sweatshirts and backpacks.
You can hear a lot of echo, and it just doesn't sound that great. But if I mute those 2 and just have the audio from the actual audio recorder off the lab mic.
Stuff, and I realized I had to buy a camera to actually take the product shots and take pictures of models and stuff. So I went out and bought a camera, and I actually found
it's much better quality. And I always think that like video editors need to pay attention to their audio. It's half of the experience, and just having that clean spoken word in your audio makes all the difference. So let's make some quick cuts just for my shortcuts, because I set this up to copy the shortcuts I had in Final Cut Pro 10. A on my keyboard is my arrow, but if I hit B, it turns it to the blade tool. So let's just clip a little piece out of here. And if I go A again, select these and delete those. And go B here, and let's just cut down here, and let's select that and delete. If I click to the left here, it just selects this, and if I hit delete, it's going to delete ripple, so it's deleting any space here. Now let me just drag this to the left on the top clip, and we'll go from this one angle.
Enjoying taking the photos more than I did designing the actual clothes. Ended up carrying that around with me.
And then we cut.
I then took a trip to New York just to holiday.
To that other camera angle. So what I normally do is I look for a nice break in the actual speech pattern.
With the camera, ended up carrying that around with me.
Pause using spacebar, and I'm going to drag this over here.
The camera, ended up carrying that around with me. I then took a trip to New York just to holiday and kind of saw all this.
I don't use any fancy transitions. When I edit, I always have either straight cuts, and it's only straight cuts in interviews like this. But if I'm shooting with B-roll, I'll often use maybe just a little fade to bring us out of the B-roll back into the actual interview. And to do that, to do just a straight fade, it's super simple. If you mouse over any clip, you'll see you get these little icons on either side. If I grab one of those and just pull it to the left, you can see it creates a simple fade. So no transitions for me. It's either straight cuts in interviews or simple fades, like coming back from B-roll. And I keep things that simple. So once I've built out my whole timeline, if we go back to master here, you can see once I've built out that whole timeline, that's what I'm then working on in terms of finalizing it through the last few stages. I've got all my audio on separate tracks here. I've got all my clips, and you can see above here I've got different things, like I've got text which I've dragged on, and a lot of different things. So if I go here to effects library, this is where my titles are. I can pull titles on top. I can have generators with solid color that I can change to white. All those different elements are there waiting for me. Back to my media pool here. And let's go one across now. So if I go one tab to the right after I build my timeline, I am in Fusion. Super honest, I don't use Fusion at all. Fusion is for special effects. I never use special effects in my videos. Like I said, everything's clean cuts. So I just skip over this and I go straight to color. And now let's go back to our timelines here. Let's go to that little timeline we created now as a test. So we've only got 2 clips on here, and if we go across to color, here are our 2 clips. Now, color grading is where Davinci Resolve really shines. It's such a powerful piece of software, but everyone's quite intimidated by it when they start. It can do so much, but I use it very simply, and I'll show you how I think about it. So here you've got what are called nodes. And if you think about nodes, especially for photographers, like the layers in Photoshop, that's how I use them. I just use them linear. You can have things branching off, and you can have nodes that affect other nodes, but not other nodes. I don't use it like that. I use everything in sequence on one line so that they act as layers in Photoshop. And what I do with this first node is I create my base color grade, my primary color grade, which is just to correct the flat footage. So the footage I shoot in camera is shot on Cine 4 on the Sony, so it has a slightly flatter look. And the first thing I want to do is pull some contrast into my actual image. And I can do that in a number of ways. So you've got a little tab here, which is your curves. Curves, everyone who uses Lightroom or Photoshop, especially photographers, will be very familiar with curves. So what I can do is I could just pull in some contrast using the curves like I normally would on any given image. You could do it that way. Let me reset. So if I right click on this node and go reset grade, it's just going to flatten that back out. Video editors like to use color wheels. They're very simple to use. Lift, gamma, gain just are your shadows, your midtones, and your highlights. And the little wheel underneath is what you want to use in terms of pulling in your actual exposure. And offset here is just your global exposure. So you can see if I dial this up and down, that's my global exposure. So I might want to pull that up a bit to start, and then pull my shadow wheel down to sort of darken my shadows, over to my highlights and boost those up a little bit, and then maybe take this wheel here left and right and see where I want my midtones. So something like that. That looks like a fairly good sort of contrast level for me, maybe shadows down a little bit. And then I've got my color boost here and my saturation. Let's push the saturation up a little bit. It's slightly yellowy, so I might want to dial that back a little bit. So if I come over here to my color wheels again, so I've got my shadows, midtones, and my highlights. And we've got on each color wheel green through yellow, orange, red, magenta, blue, cyan, back to green. And I can pull colors in or out of my image by using these color wheels. So because it's a bit yellowy, I might just want to pull the opposite of yellow. So pull into the blues a little bit, just slightly on those highlights, and maybe the midtones as well, just to take out some of that yellow there. I could do that on this global slider, the offset, and then that would sort of give a cast over the whole thing, but it's better to sort of pull those in or out. And this is where you can get very creative as well. I mean, you can see if I wanted to go wild, I could just sort of pull in loads of blues into my shadows, which obviously looks horrendous. If I double click it, that puts that little dot back to the middle and cancels that. But that sort of gives me a good starting point for that grade. Now I can add another node or another layer. So if I right click in this area and I go add node and I go corrector over here, that's going to add another corrector node. I just need to attach it to this line. So drag it up until that line glows, let it go, and now it's in sequence. So this, whatever correction I do here, will now add to the correction I've made before it on this tab. So let's see, what else can we do? We could go here to our qualifier. This is a really powerful tool. I'm not going to go through everything here. I'm just giving you a quick brush over like the basic corrections you can use. And what I'm going to show you is plenty to get you started. So with our corrector, you can see if I mouse over the image, I've got a little eyedropper tool. So let's go to my reds here. And I'm going to expand this out a little bit. So what it's done is it's selected the reds in the images. And you should be able to see here, just giving you a little outline of the area that you're affecting. So now if I dial my saturation up 100%, you can see what it's affecting in the actual image on those, on his, some of his skin is being selected as well, but also those sort of, that collar on his shirt as well. And you can do different things, like you can change it to be brighter or darker, and it's only those areas you've actually qualified that are being affected. So you can imagine, for example, I wouldn't do this in this image, but you can imagine if there's blue sky in an image, you could select the blue sky and you could saturate that blue sky, you could change the hue, or you could dial it down to be darker. There's lots of different things you can do with that. So if I add another node, corrector, and I drag that onto the line as well, if I come across to here, this fourth thing along called window, and let's select the round window here. If I click it, it's going to create a window on my frame. I do sometimes use this, and I drag this is the feathering of the area that's selected, and drag this shape out a little bit, And if I just put this center area here over the left side of his face where the light's hitting, at the moment that window you can see, I'm going to affect what's in the middle of this window, and it's going to feather towards the outside where I'm not going to affect anything in the outside. But what I want to do is, let's say I want to darken the areas around, so you're looking at the center here. So I'm going to hit this little icon here on the right hand side of this window, and it's going to invert that so that now the center isn't being affected, but the outside is. And now if I come back to my global exposure here, I can dial this down and I can darken the outside of that area down, and maybe I bring the highlights down as well. So the brightest highlights the image and now around his face. So you can see the first one here, I just corrected the exposure, contrast, a little bit of saturation. We just played around just to show you what that corrector did there with those qualifiers, and then I've created a window here to draw your attention. This is how simply I like to grade. And then the big trick you need to know is, obviously, if you've got loads of clips along here, you don't want to have to do this for every single clip. So the simplest way to do it is if I click on the next clip that I want to color grade, and you can select multiple by just holding Control. And then if you've got one clip that you like the grade on and it's the same angle, this isn't, but I'll show you what to do about that. You just go right click on the one next to it and you go apply grade, and it's going to apply the same grade on top of that clip that you've just selected. So now obviously that first one there, that's your contrast. It matches the first one that you did, but maybe it's you want to correct that just a little bit more because it's shot slightly differently. I want to bring the exposure up a touch. Let's leave that qualifier there, and let's come across here to, actually let's just reset this grade because we're only messing around on that. And this window now is out of place. So we want to drag that window over the left side of his face there and maybe change the shape slightly. So now every time I've got this close-up shot, I can select all those close-up angles and copy exactly that grade across to all of them, and it saves you a ton of time. Once you build those looks, you can just apply it to every clip that looks similar and then just go into each and tweak rather than build it from scratch. So if we move one tab along to the right, we've got our Fairlight Studio. Actually, let's just go back to edit quickly, and I want to select the final timeline with everything that I had on it. Let's go back to Fairlight. This is my audio studio where I can make sure that all my audio levels are correct. Let's just pull this along a little bit. So we have our different tracks, audio 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I've got the interview audio on the top there. I have a pre-recorded bit of Squarespace audio just at the start here on the 2, which is the ad read. That was a slightly different audio level, so I wanted it on a different track. We've got some music here on track 3 and separate music on track 4. So I've split them out. Basically now when I play,
if you're happy with, but
I can see my levels jumping up and down here.
For a long walk.
See over here where the music is. I can see how much we're sort of peaking on different aspects of the audio. Addictive. And I can use this mixer here to dial audio up. So maybe I want my spoken word up so it matches better. I want my music down because maybe it's slightly too loud. Here I can dial that down. And I can come across and start adding things like effects on these different channels. So you can see here I've added a vocal effect. So if I right click on a channel here with this little plus thing, I can go channel. I've got things like delay. I can add reverb, change pitch. Voice channel here is something I use a lot for sort of to sort of sweeten the dialogue of things. I might sort of push up some of the bass in the spoken word and the treble. I'm not going to teach you how to audio mix here. There's obviously a lot you can do, but just by looking at the different levels here as you sort of play through things, you can make sure that everything is roughly equal and that it's all sounding good. Fairlight itself is a really powerful audio editor. And once I've got everything balanced in my audio, the last thing is to come across here to deliver. And this is where I'm actually going to prepare the file for export. So let's go across here to YouTube. I could go down here to 4K and change all my resolutions. I only film in HD for everything anyway, so 1080p is fine. Change my file name. Let's go Josh Test, and we're outputting to desktop. That's fine, and all my details here are good. I could upload directly to YouTube if I give it sign-in details. I don't bother with that. I just kick it out to my desktop as a file and upload manually. And I go add to render queue down the bottom here. And that analyzes the timeline here. And here it is at the bottom here, job 4. And when I'm ready, I can just hit render, and it's going to start to work through all this, all the clips, everything that I've produced. It's going to create that file, put it onto the desktop for me where it's ready to upload online. So I hope that's helped those of you out there who are aspiring filmmakers who need access to a full-featured video editor, but you're on a budget. It's a great option. It's certainly worked well for me. And one of the most powerful things about Davinci Resolve are its color grading tools. I did a video probably about 2-3 years ago now where I showed you how I used Final Cut Pro 10 at the time to do my color grading. And if you want, I will do an updated video of that showing you how I do the same sort of color grading but using the more finesse tools I certainly find of Davinci Resolve. So if you're interested in that, comment below. I'll take a scan. If there's enough interest, I'll try and put that out for you. There are a few caveats before you dive into Davinci Resolve that you might want to think about. And the first one is that I don't use any special effects in my videos. So if you do, you might find that you really need Adobe After Effects or Apple Motion for some reason because they're more powerful. I can't comment on whether Fusion keeps up with them. In the little bit of research I've done, it seems to be pretty powerful itself, but you're going to need to do digging for yourself to find out if Fusion is going to do everything on the special effects side that you need it to. There are also a handful of features that aren't available in the free version. You would have to get Davinci Resolve 17. Things like the free version is limited to 4K 60 frames a second. You can't have higher frame rate or more resolution than that. You don't get access to the AI neural filters. You don't get object removal or noise reduction, and you can't do remote grades where you can work in a team and someone can work on the edit, but someone else in another location can be working on the grade through multiple platforms. So just keep in mind, I mean, those are not things I need in my use case, but you might. And so if you need those things, you will have to pay for the studio version. It's also important to say that if you use the free version of Davinci Resolve, Blackmagic will give you no customer service. They won't help you out. And I found this out the hard way. In that first month where I was using Davinci Resolve, I had a little timeline bug that kept appearing. I could work around it and still get videos out on time, but it was just annoying. So I contacted their customer service and said, hey, this is the issue that I'm having. And they asked me, what was my serial number? And I said, look, I'm just on the free version. And they turned around and said, listen, we don't support people using the free version, only the paid version. So that is something to think about. And I believe that the studio version of Davinci Resolve 17 is around $300. Personally, I've been able to get along fine with the free version, but it is something to consider. I know a lot of you out there are just starting out and you don't have a ton of cash to throw around on fancy software. This is really a fantastic option. And after using it for 2 years myself, I can say that I'm 100% happy with it. And for my use case, it's more than enough software for me to do everything that I need to do. In fact, all the videos for the last 2 years that you've seen on this channel have all been cut on Davinci Resolve. So if you are thinking about getting out there, you want to start making things, but all that software intimidates you, I hope you've seen today that it is actually quite intuitive to use and you can definitely at least give it a go with no risk because it's 100% free. Thanks again to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. If you need a new website or a domain, they're a fantastic option. I've used them myself for almost a decade now, long before they were a sponsor on this channel. Over the last year, I've been getting into their email campaigns, which I found really easy to use. And some of you are already signed up to that newsletter. You can go to my contact page and just put your email address in the block there, and you then get an email to confirm that you actually want to subscribe to that newsletter. And then when I come to put those emails together, it's really easy, nice and clean and minimally laid out, just like my website. And I can just do it by clicking and dragging in blocks of texts or buttons that you can click on or images. Looks really clean and simply laid out. And when I'm ready to go, I can just hit send and it sends out to that whole mailing list. And then I even get graphs in the back end to say how many were sent out, how many people received those emails, and how many were opened, so I can see how people are actually getting those emails on the other end.
Start your free trial today at squarespace.com and go to squarespace.com/Sean Tucker to get 10% off your first purchase.